This is Group 1's final presentation for the Renaissance Manager course. We had a great time working on this project together and look forward to sharing our design thinking process for the Aging in Place challenge with you. In this presentation, we will walk you through how we approach the challenge from the Discover mode of design thinking through the Evaluate mode. On behalf of Group 1, we hope you enjoy this presentation and look forward to receiving your feedback. A quick overview of the agenda for this presentation. First, we will provide a quick recap of the Aging in Place challenge, which most of you are already familiar with. Next, we introduce you to our prototype at a high level, which will provide you a context as we walk through our group's design thinking process. Then we will cover our progress through the modes of design thinking: discover, define, create, evaluate, with a detailed look at our final prototype. Lastly, we will touch on the insights we derived from this project and discuss how we plan to implement design thinking in our daily lives. As many of you already know, the group project for the Renaissance Manager course revolved around the idea of aging in place, which is the ability for the elderly to continue to live in their own homes for as long as possible. Specifically, we were asked to apply design thinking to the challenge of enhancing the aging in place experience. Did you know that 90% of seniors want to stay in their own homes as they age? With life expectancy on the rise, it was an average of 69 years in 1950, 79 years in 2009, and expected to be 84 years by 2059. Elderly people are living longer, and more of them are opting to live out their twilight years in the comfort of their own home. Before we started this project, we were not familiar with this issue. Over the course of our group work, we've come to understand the challenge in detail. One issue that resonated with our group as we empathized with the aging in place demographic was that those elderly who opt to live in place become increasingly isolated and lonely, particularly in cases where no family is nearby and they no longer have access to a vehicle or other transport. You'll see how this played out in our prototype and our design thinking process in this presentation.
Our prototype is a website called Wise and Wrinkled. It encourages a way for those aging in place to connect in their community. Not only does it encourage them to connect via internet, such as chat centers and chat rooms, for those with like-minded interests, such as discussing classic movies, veterans in a chat room, or even online dating, it also provides them a way to connect via the community in person, such as volunteering, providing professional services, and participating in physical activities. Those examples would be fostering a pet, providing basic administrative assistance, and also joining a swim team.
As we constructed our interview guide, we brainstormed a wide range of questions. We wanted to familiarize ourselves as much as possible with our end user population. We developed questions on the individual's background and communities in which they lived, their physical, emotional, psychological, and financial well-being, as well as hobbies, pastimes and enjoyments, pets, family, safety concerns, and caregivers. But with so much information, we then needed to concentrate on those issues we felt best related to the aging in place process. Using a composite character profile helped us compile our respective interview and empathy map information. Harold, the name given our composite character, made the information more real to us and more relatable. Harold was widowed, intelligent, active, and still living independently. He values his community and likes to contribute to it when possible. At this point, we needed to reflect on what we had learned. What insights had we gained? And how did these insights relate to a definition of our challenge? In considering how this group could benefit from staying connected to their communities, we also wondered how the community could also benefit from them. Developing a point of view proved more difficult than we had imagined. As you see, It took several iterations and feedback from Professor Henshaw before we felt we were on the right track. Our first attempt suggested a solution in the statement of need. The May 31st revised attempt states 2 needs, but no real insight. We finally arrived at the highlighted point of view, which reads, "An elderly person who lives in his own home needs to feel a sense of purpose and belonging within his community, because those feelings help him stave off loneliness and keep his mind sharp."
Transition to create mode, it is important to understand that we need to look for opportunities rather than finding a solution too early. Using our final POV, the team spent a great amount of time thinking about actionable questions using the HWM statements. We then convened via group conference call to discuss all the proposed statements and subsequently selected our final HWM. And this statement is broad enough to offer a variety of possible solutions for us. This is another part of design thinking where we go wide again. And to echo Professor Henshaw's analogy using a camera, this is when we open the aperture again to capture more images. Having said that, the team used a divergent thinking where we ask a wide-ranging question to explore the full situation in many different possible options before we can pinpoint our solution. In order to streamline our efficiency, each group member came up with multiple ideas prior to our conference call, and it allowed us to use our time more efficiently. We use collective thinking and an open brainstorming approach where we look at our challenges from many different angles, using predetermined themes to better help us focus on our brainstorm and any overlapping and repetitive ideas. Came up with great ideas during brainstorming sessions, but in order to narrow down the closest solution, we used several selection criteria or filters to get to the closest solution. It is important to note that these filters plays an important role in the determination of the viability of each idea. From elderly's perspective, who has to use the finished product, from the perspective of the business who will embrace this solution, from the technology perspective of what is physically possible to implement, and more importantly, the sustainability of the solution. Based on these filters, we've selected pairing with business and charities with elderly having a relevant expertise in order to enhance the aging in place. Creating a prototype for our solution proved to be very difficult. Due to time limitation, we came up with a prototype in the form of PowerPoint presentation, simply to continue the evolution of our ideas and to provide a means for gaining more feedback from our users. The intent is to make our idea tangible to further develop those various solutions and essentially pave the way to the evaluate mode. Unfortunately, Professor Henshaw thinks that our prototype may not provide us with additional feedback from the user because it only describes the prototype rather than acting as the actual prototype. Therefore, we proceeded to creating a new one. So Henshaw's feedback, we've created a more interactive prototype in which users can use. Using the secondary prototype, we were able to determine that there's a strong evidence that our idea to create a not-for-profit business solution to connect elderly and charities and businesses with specific labor requirements addresses our users' need. The overarching positive results from our prototype test and the user's willingness to participate in volunteer programs and professional opportunities indicate that we're on the right track, and it is not necessary to go back to discover mode to dig deeper to uncover the right need. However, it was apparent that the test users were having difficulties navigating our mock-up website for the business, which led to several valuable constructive criticisms that we will incorporate in our final design, including the new ideas we've captured during the prototype testing.
The evaluate mode consists of placing the prototype in front of users to actively observe how they interact and react with the product, as well as to follow up with questions and feedback afterward to determine what the users liked, what they didn't like, and what they didn't understand. Initially, before the users saw the prototype, we asked them 3 questions. Questions such as, what do you think of the concept of a website to engage you with a local community, and their preference to accessing the platform via phone, internet, or in person. We then introduced them to the prototype, and we actively observed them as they went through the entire website. Following that, we revisited the website with each user and asked them 3 more questions, such as, why did you revisit this page consistently? You looked confused while visiting this. What questions did you have about this page? How did you feel about this? And so on. After that, we followed up with 7 in-depth questions, such as, do you think your demographic would utilize this website? Why would they utilize it? What would you prefer? Hence, going back to the first question, phone, in person, or website. And then from there, we included feedback capture grids for each person we conducted an interview with. We received a lot of useful feedback from the users so that we could go back and fix the designs on the prototype. Some feedback included volunteering, which seemed to be a huge hit among all the users. The layout of the website seemed to be slightly confusing. The headings at the top of each intersection, from the drop down, there were photos. They seemed slightly confusing and they seemed too large, so that was one note that we noted to make them smaller. Additionally, the drop downs themselves seemed a little confusing, so maybe adding photos. And then this website itself and the prototype included $signs and a shop button, which is something that we actually have to look into ourselves to remove the shop and the $sign and just add either click here to add or something along those lines to make it more user-friendly. One big surprise that we found from all the interviewees that we had was that they preferred telephone as opposed to the website. This showed how comfortable or how uncomfortable the users were with using a website in general, not just our website. So that may be something we would like to change or something to ask additional users when we do additional feedback in the future. As for next steps in the project, it's important to note that we did receive a lot of positive feedback on engaging those aging in place with their communities. This is just in general, not the prototype or website specifically. Again, I noted that volunteering was a very big hit, so maybe we had talked about including more volunteering activities for those aging in place with their community. At this time we had 2, and we'd also thought of more, but we would like to expand on that. From there, we noted that the website prototype led to a lot of great constructive criticism for the future. So at this point, assuming that we were to move forward with the project from here, we would create a timeline and a plan of action, including features and feasibility, funding, expanding it to different locations, and as well as adding additional user feedback from testing and more prototyping. An immediate next step would include finalizing the functional requirements, such as the operational capabilities of the website. It's also important to note that we could use the initial user feedback and any additional user feedback to assess if the website is truly the best potential idea for engaging those that are aging with their communities. As noted, they all had the same thing in common, that the telephone might be their best idea, so that could be something we want to keep in mind for the future.
As we look back on this project, our group appreciated this exercise in applying design thinking to a very real challenge, the agent in place process. In each phase of the project, we learned new things and came away with unexpected insights that we will share here. In the Discover phase of our project, we began by looking at secondary sources such as the Ipsos Ethnography Center of Excellence video interviews with elderly experiencing aging in place. This helped focus the topics of the questions in our interview guide to include topics in areas such as living at home, physical aging and family, healthcare costs and finances, and psychology. We first started our interview guide a bit too constrained in our line of questioning, which included many yes or no questions. Professor Henshaw's feedback that we leave questions open-ended and, in some cases, ask for a scaled ranking in response to a question such as, rate how you feel about your financial security on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the most secure, helped drive new insights in our interviews during the Discover mode. In the Define phase of our project, our detailed notes from our interviews facilitated the creation of our empathy maps, which segued nicely into cultivating a rich, in-depth character profile or persona. We relied heavily on the persona we created as a group. As mentioned previously in this presentation, our persona, Harold, helped us think critically about the needs of our user demographic and to empathize with their situation. Lastly, we didn't realize developing a point of view statement would be so involved. We iterated on 3 different POV statements before finalizing our 4th and final POV. Professor Hinshaw helped us identify where in the early POV drafts we were including potential solutions instead of framing a construct to pursue a solution within, and also how we were constraining our POV by being too narrow in scope. These iterations to the POV ensured we had a sufficiently broad construct to work within when brainstorming and creating a prototype in the create mode. The how might we iterative process and brainstorming sessions our group participated in during the create mode of this project helped us flesh out the most compelling ideas for our prototype. In the absence of physical meetings, our group had success in each generating specific how might we statements and brainstorm prototype ideas, and then having a conference call to discuss each, narrowing down the list to just a few final ideas for our prototype. Our first prototype, a PowerPoint image of a website mockup, was not sufficiently interactive. We spent time reworking our prototype and created a real website with working URLs. This allowed for users to provide us with detailed insights in the test phase of the evaluate mode that wouldn't have otherwise been possible with the stagnant PowerPoint slide. In the evaluate mode, our efforts to create an in-depth test plan paid off. We received useful feedback from our test users, but made sure not to steer the user or over-explain the prototype in the process. This allowed for useful feedback that ultimately would necessitate further changes to our prototype. For example, test users felt the website was confusing and asked if there was a way to sign up for the service in person. As a result, we discussed revising our prototype to include training at local senior centers and community centers where elderly could learn about the nonprofit and sign up directly with the help of an employee in person at those locations. As our group looked ahead and thought about how we might deploy design thinking in our daily lives, coming from different backgrounds, we all had different approaches. I work in venture capital and plan to actively look for design considerations taken by prospective portfolio companies that pitch our firm. I also plan to think about ways to deploy the design thinking process in my own workflow, such as improving upon my firm's pipeline management process. Camille, who works in the legal field, plans to deploy the 4 modes of design thinking and work resulting from her company's recent joint venture. Jean, an ophthalmologist, plans to make a concerted effort to deploy a growth mindset in her daily work. And PJ, a regulatory affairs specialist, plans to ensure users are first in mind when making decisions on how medical devices his company develops and designs are safe and effective. Thank you for watching Group 1's presentation on the Aging in Place Design Thinking Challenge for the Renaissance Manager course. We look forward to working with many of you throughout the course of this program. Go Tribe!